It's an absolutely terrific honor on behalf of the College of Engineering, the faculty, the students, and the staff to welcome Francis Lee. Let me spend a few minutes telling you about Francis. He is chairman of the board and former CEO of Synaptics, which is a Santa Clara company known for touch sensing technology, which is used in the majority of smartphones, tablets, notebook PCs, and many other electronic devices. Synaptics has been an amazing innovator. However, Francis defines his Silicon Valley company in an unexpected way. And I quote, "We're not a tech company," he has said. "We are a human interface company making use of one of the 5 intuitive senses, that of touch," end of quote. A little bit about Francis's life. He was 16 when he moved from Hong Kong to Sacramento in 1968. He began attending a local high school without knowing a single word of English, skipping lunch for the first few weeks because he couldn't figure out the menu. Now, back then, there were no ESL programs. It was total immersion. He finally pointed to some Twinkies near the cash register, handed over a $20 bill, and hoped that he would get the right change. That's what he had for lunch for a while. In all these years, he still remembers thinking that Twinkies were quite good.
Yes, they're good.
I'm glad you're healthy, Francis. Now, even at 16, Francis adapted quickly. He wasn't about to let a language barrier get in his way. He transferred to McClatchy High School the following year, where his math and science skills put him in the running for a scholarship to USC. He just missed getting the scholarship, thank God. So after 2 years at Sacramento City College, he transferred to UC Davis, and he arrived as an electrical engineering major thanks to the far-sighted advice of a Sacramento City professor who believed that semiconductors would be the way for the future. Francis graduated with honors in 1974 and was recruited by National Semiconductor, a Connecticut-based firm that had moved its headquarters to Santa Clara the same year Francis and his family arrived in California. He was hired as a product engineer, and during the next 2 decades, Francis rose through management and executive positions that included director of the Standard Logic Business Unit, vice president of quality and reliability, and vice president of the Communications and Computing Group. In May of '95, he returned to Hong Kong to found and become general manager of NSM, a joint venture of National Semiconductor and S-Mega Telecommunications. He welcomed the move and brought his entire family, which allowed his son and daughter to experience a complete cultural immersion similar to the one that he faced a few years earlier. When Francis and his family returned to Silicon Valley 3 years later, his children were fluent in Chinese, and he was ready for a new challenge. He didn't wait long. He was approached by Synaptics, a 12-year-old company that had earned its industry reputation by making chips for first-generation laptop touchpads, a great improvement over the trackball. Remember the trackball? That was terrible, wasn't it? Francis tested the water by serving as a consultant from August through November of '98, and then embraced a new role as Synaptics CEO and president. When the company went public in January of '02, 98% of its revenue came from laptops. Superstar status arrived on February 20, 2004, when Apple's iPod mini was unveiled. Its functionality was controlled by a Synaptics controlling a scrolling wheel that adjusted volume and navigated through the various menus. I still have one of those. By the following year, Synaptics had sold 150 million touchpads that found their way into 55% of the world's laptops. Big name clients included Dell, HP, and Acer. But that really was only the beginning. During the next few years, under Francis's guidance, Synaptics further refined capacitive touch technology in order to incorporate a greater range of movements and gestures. The initial iPod click wheels set to touch-sensitive screens that would distinguish between taps, flicks, slides, and swooshes. Now we know why Francis calls it a human interface company. In 2009, Forbes ranked Synaptics 13th among America's top 20 small publicly traded companies. That autumn, Francis stepped down as CEO in order to become chairman of the board. By then, Synaptics was producing the sensing technology in more than 60% of touchpads in laptops, smartphones, MP3 players, and many other electronic devices. Just last year, Synaptics was recognized by the Bay Area's news groups as one of the region's best companies to work for. Philanthropic activities have included Synaptics' participation with the Shinshin Educational Foundation, which helps lift children from poverty by granting them access to a better education. Events such as benefit concerts have raised funds for an English and computer teachers training program at rural schools in China, and I've thoroughly enjoyed many conversations learning about Francis's experiences in China. And as well, he's become a popular guest speaker at universities where he shares engineering's exciting opportunities with the next generation of innovators, just as he's about to do here this afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce Francis Lee.
Thank you, Dean and Ricky. That was really, really kind of you. So anyway, I have a daughter and a son. They are both born here. My wife is here. And actually, my daughter, when she was like 6 years old, she looked at me and said, "Oh, Daddy, you don't know how to speak English." And she is correct, right? Because English is a second language to me. And then she started going to Chinese school, started learning how to speak Chinese. And one day he looked at me and said, "Daddy, you also don't know how to speak Chinese." And those are the only two languages I know, right? Other than that, I don't have a problem. So before I start, thank you, Ricky. Before I start, I'd like to introduce Ron. Ron, stand up. So this is Dr. Suhu, okay? For those are the students, right? So the reason why I want to introduce Ron is Ron actually was my professor when I was going to school in Davis. And Ron is also the founding member, founding faculty of the engineering department in here. And since Ron has started the school, I mean, Dean and Ricky, a bunch of other people has obviously made the UC Davis Engineering School proud, and I've seen a lot of accolades, about the school. And Oliver and Ricky, met me a few weeks ago, was telling me that in the incoming college applicants, there were like 11,000 applicants fighting for 700 positions. I'm just glad that I'm not one of them, because I probably would not get in. With the average GPA was better than 4.0. Oh my God, that is scary. So anyway, it's a great school, and I'm just honored to have an opportunity to speak to you today. And Ricky wants me to talk about innovation and leadership. So I'm going to share with you my experiences during the last many years on those two topics. Certainly, I'm not going to tell you I'm expert at any one of this. This is just in the active session. So please feel free to stop me to ask any questions, anything that, that comes to mind here. So we talk about leadership, so let's talk about leader for a minute, right? So when there's a leader, there's got to be a follower, right? So if you think of a position, and using the analogy as a position player in sports. So there could only be one cleanup hitter in the baseball. There can only be one quarterback in a football. And there are a bunch of other position players, right? So I just kind of use this analogy as saying that there's leadership and there's followership. It doesn't mean that one is any worse than the other, okay? Because if everybody wants to be a leader, it's like everybody wants to be a cleanup hitter, and nobody is going to be the lead-off hitter, and nobody is going to be the second place hitter to move the runners, up to the next base and stuff like that, right? So I just want to introduce the concept that is not necessarily bad, okay? When you think about leadership and followership. So let me kind of, run a poll here. How many of you guys, right? If you have a choice, do you want to be a leader or do you want to be a follower? Who wants to be a leader? Okay. Who wants to be a follower? Which one is harder, leader or follower? Why is that? King, by the way, he is an alumni from the school, very similar background, I find out. So what do you say, King? You got all the arrows coming at you. Well, like I said, if you are a follower, right, your number one task is find a good leader. After you find a good leader, you are probably okay. Okay, so, I think King is right. Well, why is that? Okay, I'm not suggesting that if one has any less diminishing a statue than the other one. So let me kind of share with you some of the study that has been done by two professors in Santa Clara University, James and Barry. They are actually pretty renowned in the area of leadership. They have written a bunch of books. Okay, one of the books they wrote is called The Leadership Challenges. In that book, what he did is he put down and said, what are the characteristics of admired leaders? If you have to run a poll, of people. What are they? So they said admired leaders are honest. They are forward-looking. They don't just look at what's happening now. They obviously have to be competent. They inspire people. They're intelligent. They are fair. They are broad, not just focusing on some narrow stuff. They support people, and they don't beat around the bush. They are straightforward. And they're dependable. Do you guys agree with that? They all sound pretty reasonable? But wait, there's another list. They need to be cooperative. They need to be determined, imaginative, ambitious, courageous, caring, mature, loyal, self-control, and also independent. Do we have anybody like that?
There's one thing missing.
Which is?
Water.
Huh?
Walking on water.
Walking on water, yeah. It's also got to be a miracle worker. So, but these are the admired characteristics of admired leaders, okay? And these two professors actually run tons of surveys to people. Say, well, what is it like? What is it like? So I'm going to ask you guys, of all those characteristics, which one do you think is most important for leaders, according to this poll? Any guess?
Supportive.
Supportive. Inspiring. And Bonnie, you said?
The first one is
Honesty.
honesty.
Courageous. Everything. Remember, this is a poll that they run, right? So there's no right or wrong. They just say, they interview all these people. What is the number one answer? It's none of that. Honesty. As a matter of fact, the way how I wrote it is in a declining order. So honesty is number one. So Bonnie, you must have thought and read the book. It's intuitive to Bonnie. So honesty is number one. Just keep that in mind. Because if you're not genuine, okay, if you're not become yourself, it's hard to lead. All those things are important. But when you run the poll of the people, when they look at admired leaders, what's the number one thing is honesty. So those are the admired characteristics. Let's talk about the challenges. If you want to be a leader, what are the challenges you have to do? And I would say the challenge is doing all of this thing plus walk on water. Like Professor Agassi said, right? So all those admired traits are also challenges that the leaders has got to exhibit. Do you guys agree with that? Right? So if you have to do all this thing plus walk on water, and you have to be honest, right? Do all those things, you got to admit it's going to be hard to find, correct? There's one more thing on here that I think is very challenging for leaders, and that is the expectation that you have to do everything right. So if I'm following a leader, right, I would expect this guy to make the right decision most of the time. When I run into trouble, right, I expect these people to bail me out. I expect people, independent of what it is, I look up to this individual, and he's going to perform miracles, right, and take me out. So that expectation is tremendously bearing on leaders. As a matter of fact, one other thing I would say that is a very lonely position. When I was running the company, people will come to me and sometimes say, wow, you're the CEO of the company. You have all this power. You have all this thing. I would look at them and say, let me tell you, I have the loneliest job in the company. And they'll look at me like, what are you talking about? You can make anything happen. But you think about it, right? Can I really do anything? I can do nothing because I'm just basically an administrator. I don't design things. I don't manufacture things. I don't do anything. I depend on people to produce all those things, right? When things go right, I have to be careful, make sure that people don't get so, confident that become arrogant. When things are bad, I have to be optimistic, even though I'm scared to death. I have to put out with a posture that, hey, you got to have confidence in what you're doing. Can I talk to anybody? I cannot talk to any of my staff about sometimes of those concerns and worries that I have. I have to do it in a very careful manner, right? I cannot talk to the board because I'm supposed to know everything. The buck stops on my desk, right? So you really, sometimes when you think about being a leader, okay, it sounds good enough. So for those of you that want to be a leader, I just want you to understand it comes with baggages. It is not free. You guys agree with that? Okay. So if that's the case, I'm going to introduce another concept. Leadership, there's a term called servant leadership. It's actually coined by a professor in Stanford. There's a book and stuff like written all about this point, right? So to lead is to serve. That means that you're leading a whole bunch of followers. You're actually servicing them. So when you're a CEO of the company, yeah, you work for the shareholders. You're also working for the employees. Yeah, you do have a lot of power that's given to you because of your positions. But to lead is to serve. If anytime you think about this thing the other way around, you think that to lead is that a power, boy, you better stand back and think very careful about it again. Guys agree? Okay, so given all this, right, how do you start with leadership? Right, all those characteristics you got to deal with, okay? And I will, ask you to remember this. Leadership starts with I, so with you. Because either you lead by example or you don't lead at all. So this is a case where if you do as I say, but don't do as I do, you will never be a good leader. This is that's why, when I talk to employees in our company, I said, you got to walk the talk. Because smart people can see through, crap, forgive my language here, really quickly, right? They can cut through all those chains and say, hey, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, I'm not going to follow you, right? So leadership starts with yourself. And you got to walk the talk. You got to practice, what you preach. So given all of this, then I have to ask, well, how do you, acquire some of those skills, okay? So I like to tell you that leadership is actually a developing process because nobody, okay, can learn those things overnight. So I think some of you guys are probably golfers, I can use any analogies, right? So Tiger Woods started golfing, I guess, when he was like 4 years old, stuff like that. I mean, he's pretty good, okay, in his profession. But he practices all the time. For those of you who follow him, right? You talk about he twists his swing, something is not working, he got to do this all the time. So as good as he is, he starts early, but he never stopped. He never stopped doing new things. So that is actually no different than leadership. You have to continuously, learn your skill, practice it, continuously to make, because of all those admired characteristics, nobody can learn it overnight, and nobody can be good at it. So leadership is a journey versus a destination. You kind of never get there, okay? I'm sure you guys heard about the continuous improvement process and stuff like that, and that is very true with leadership. You never stop. There's always something more for you to learn. There's always something else there that you say, gee, I don't quite understand what that is, okay? So what I'm about to talk a little bit about here is to hopefully share two things with you that I've learned over the years, that if I had to be sitting in your chair again, I would do that a whole lot sooner, okay? And again, it's something that, like I said, as I reflect back on my career, what would I have done a little differently? So first of all, a good friend of mine, he's in his 70s, but when you look at it, he looked like he's in the 40s. This guy is young, he's energetic. So I asked this guy, what's your secret? I know who you are. Why is it you look so young and so full of energy? So he said, Francis, let me tell you, is that age is a function of three things. First is your biological age. That's what year you're born, how old you are, okay? The second thing is your physical age, right? You may be 40 years old, but you could have a 60-year-old body if you abuse it. Or the other way around, you may be 40-year-old have a 30-year-old body if you take good care of it. And then the third thing is that is also a function of your mental age. What's your outlook in life? I have an uncle lives in Sacramento. He's 85 years old. He's my brother, my mother's brother, youngest brother. And he's 85. I have taken him all over the world traveling and all this and that. Okay, this guy has got one of the best mental outlooks. He never takes anything very seriously. He's always, even killed it. Okay, and people love to hang around with him because it's just a lot of fun. So he said those are the function of those three things: your physical age, your mental age, and your biological age. Now, of course, right, there's certain things you cannot reverse, like your biological age. If you're 100 years old, you're 100 years old. But you can make it 100 years old, get a lot more mileage in it if you take care of your body physically and mentally. So using that as a kind of an analogy about the age, and I kind of put that back in the leadership. And I say leadership, is something that you have to learn all the time. It's something that you deal with all the time, okay? So again, let me share some experience with you. Enrique said that part of my career was in National Semiconductor. And there was a period of time when I was in charge of all the operations in a semiconductor company. So I have operations all over the world, in Asia, in Europe, in US, and so on and so forth. I would tell you that there's something goes wrong every day, all the time. I just don't know where. Now, there are a lot of things going right, but guess what? Nobody pays attention to what's going right. I wake up in the morning, and I know there's something goes wrong all the time. When I go to sleep, I know there's something going on all the time. My wife, at those times would see me talking on the phone as I leave the house in the morning, and as I drive back at home, I will be still having a phone talking. It's as if like my phone is glued to my ears. Because there's always all this problem, happens all the time, okay? So if you have to deal with those kind of challenges, right? Things happen all the time, right? They could be dislocation because of your competitors. They could be customer demands. They could be personal challenges. They could be cultural issues, okay? Things that you cannot find in a textbook anywhere, like some kind of law of physics or electrical principles. You do this kind of thing, you expect this thing. That just doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, and sometimes even though you think you've seen it all, there's another one that comes out at you. They haven't thought about it. So if you have to deal with all those kind of challenges that come in an interrupted manner, I would say that you have to be ready to deal with it physically and mentally. So the two focus areas that I would share with you is if you want to, the thing about to be a leader, you have got to be in your tip-top shape, both physically and mentally, because it's a very draining experience and exercise. It comes at you at ways that you don't even know it, okay? It comes at you in a way that's maybe least unexpected, but it happens. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how does one take care of both of those things, okay? And still be able to do your day-to-day things and so on and so forth. So first of all, let me talk about the physical part. So I think all of us have been in the news and heard about the spending challenges the country has, are going through, right? The sequester, the spending cuts and all this and that. And typically, it's really driven, two of the things that people talk about a lot is that the Social Security is about to go broke, right? The other thing about it is the healthcare cost has spiraled out of control, right? So I don't know how many of you guys realize that, okay? In the US, we are spending roughly about 15% of our GDP on gross domestic product on healthcare costs. And it's going to go to almost 20% by 2017. Every percentage point is $150 billion. just so you get the math. Okay? Of the 17 highest income earners in the world, U.S. is obviously one of them. U.S. spends the biggest amount of dollar on healthcare costs. But yet, we are on the U.S. life expectancy is 4 years less than the other 16 countries. So we spend the most, okay, and it's going to continue to go up. But when you look at other countries, we actually have a lot of things going on in there. So I would say that, you know, if you call it healthcare cost crisis, I think, I'm sure you guys all agree, right? So there's a lot of reason why, and I'm not about, certainly I cannot, you know, solve this problem here. I'm just share with knowledge that you probably already have. You know, there is a lot of things like the ecosystem, you know, who gets the money, right? Is that the pharmaceutical company? Is it the healthcare providers? Is that the, you know, doctors? Is that the whatever, right? There's the equity, right? There's about 40 million people that don't have insurance. So, you know, a good friend of mine is the CEO of Kaiser. He said that the top 40% of the U.S. population have the best healthcare in the world. The bottom 40% has terrible healthcare in the world. So there's all these equitable positions, you know, you talk about. The environment, right? Okay. So when you look at the healthcare challenges, you know, that we have, okay, a lot of the challenge that we have is not related, even all the money is spent on hospitals and doctors and stuff like that, okay? But a lot of the stuff that was brought on because of the dietary, you know, habits, okay, is a lack of exercise, okay, is the fact that we go into the car drives everywhere. When my family moved to Hong Kong, and we don't have a car, you know, so we walk all the time. I tell you, everybody lost weight. Because you just have to, first of all, the weather is warm, you perspire a lot, and you have to exercise a lot, right? Habits, okay, you know, Americans have a sweet tooth. We like sodas, we like cakes, okay? Incentives, you know, and once you have insurance, most of us don't even know how much an X-ray costs or any excess because insurance pays for it. I pay my deductible, that's it. There's no incentive for me to shop around and find the, you know, most proper care, right? On top of that, there's all kinds of opportunities and challenges with litigations and, you know, malpractice lawsuits and stuff like that. So I mean, the list go on, and then I list the last one here. I mean, most of the dollars actually spent after you get sick when you look at the healthcare costs. Okay? And those are reactive challenges, right? I mean, we should really, when you talk about healthcare, should focus on preventive practices, right? So of this daunting list of challenges that we all have to face, the one single question we have to ask ourselves is, what can I do? I cannot change the ecosystem. I cannot change the pharmaceutical way if they charge drugs. You know, I cannot fix any of the, you know, political, you know, challenges associated with this thing, right? So what can I do? So what I want to share with you is some of the ideas that I would like for you to think about as you prepare, right, to take on this journey of leadership. Is you got to have good health. And in order to have good health, you know, just like when you want to improve anything, right, what's the first thing you got to do? You have to measure it, right? There are many, many stories that once you start measuring things, you start getting better. So if you want to improve your health, you're going to measure it, and you're going to know what to measure. And what is that for health? It's called physical checkup, an example of that, right? So who has had, in this room here, who has had physical checkup in the last 12 months? Very good. I don't know the rest of you guys didn't raise hands. Okay. So I'll share with you a story analogy that I share with employees there all the time. If I ask each of you, and I say, how much money do you have in the bank? And if you don't know what it is, you have to get online, and you find it in a minute, 2 minutes, right? You're down to the pennies. Am I right? Now, if I ask you guys, how is your health? People look at me and say, well, I think it's pretty good. Am I right? Well, I'm okay. Now, most of us, especially men is worse. Men between the age of 35 to 55, they're the worst group. They hardly go to get physical checkups. I was there once, and I know what it's like, okay? And for those of us that indeed go to a physical checkup, this is kind of how it goes, right? You get into a lab request you to draw some blood, right? Okay, so reluctantly you go to this thing, they take blood from you, and then you set up an appointment with your doctor to see the review of the results. So that day, you go to the doctor's office, and you probably wait a half an hour for the doctor to call you. Finally, the doctor calls you up into the room, and the doctor is probably running around, seeing different patients. So you finally look at your report, right, or your report in front of them. He starts marking up. Say, oh, okay. Hey, everything is okay, Mr. Lee. Come back and see me in 6 months, or see me in 12 months. And you are happy. Can't wait to get out of there. Right? Is this common experience? Now imagine if you go to the bank and you ask them, how much money do I have in the bank? And the teller tells you, you get enough money, come back and see me in 12 months. Would that be acceptable to you? Your health is a whole lot more important, right? How much money you have. And if I further ask people, right, do you understand on your report what each of it has meant? And how can you improve it? Because most of us look at limits, right? Here's my cholesterol. If it's less than that number, I'm good, right? And for those of us that in engineering and study math and stuff like that, right, there is this thing called statistical process control, right? What that means is you want to make sure before any number goes out of control, you fix it so that you're never out of control, right? It doesn't matter what the spec limit is. Do we practice SPC with our healthcare indicators? Very few of us do. As a matter of fact, very few of us don't even have our trend line in terms of how we look at our blood sugar year after year, right? So I just want to impress upon you that it's important for us to first of all, do the physical checkup. Second of all, is to learn what those measurements are and what can you do to improve it. And what you can improve it is actually pretty straightforward. I mean, I'm not suggesting that all the science and discovery has been done to improve health here, but most of the simple stuff already known. So for example, right, besides cancer, the top disease killer in the US is what? Cardiovascular diseases. Everybody knows cholesterol is bad. Everybody knows eating certain type of food is no good. Everybody knows exercise is good for you. But you might say, why is it we don't do it? Just think about it for a minute, right? It's almost to, I hope I don't offend anybody here. It's almost like people know in general smoking is bad, but people still smoke. Why is that? Right? So I would ask you, first of all, take a serious look to prepare yourself for the leadership journey is to have good health. In order to have good health, you got to know what to measure, what does it mean, how do I get better at it. Then there are some simple diet and nutritional things. Everybody knows that. Fruits and vegetables are good, okay? Eating meat exclusively is probably not a good idea, right? The next thing here is exercise. So if you believe the theory, the human, right, is basically an animal, okay, through evolutions. When you look at animals, right, animals spend most of the time hunting for food. And when they hunt for food, they exercise like hell. They have to chase after things to work for it. We, on the other hand, go to a restaurant, right, or sit at home, It's an enjoyment for food. We don't have to hunt for anything, right? It's enjoyment. You sit there, you eat it, right? Even my Twinkie that Enrique talks about, I enjoy it very much, you know. And sometimes what you eat, besides you have not exercised, is probably not very healthy. So I would ask you to think about what kind of food should I eat, right? And they are all out there. I mean, nowadays, all you have to do is go to the website and look at it. And I will ask you guys to exercise, and I will ask you guys to do it. And this is especially important for the students back there, okay, here. That because when you are young, you're invincible. I remember when I was your age, I used to play 2 games of soccer back to back, and I don't even, I'm a little tired, but it's no big deal. I cannot even play 10 minutes now, okay? So don't let your age fool you into doing this thing. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. Most people will start paying attention to their diet and exercise after they get into trouble, after they are sick. But that's too late. So what you want to do is you want to form a good habit in such a way that it becomes just the way how it is, okay? I used to drink a lot of sodas. And until, I start paying attention to my health report, my blood sugar is going up. My family has a history of diabetes. And my father has that problem, my mother has that problem, my grandparents have that problem, okay? So, and they're still below the limit. But I don't like the trend, it's going up. So what I have to do is, I said, I gotta do something here. I start dropping it, I start reading the food label and stuff like that, and bang, my blood sugar just drops like a rock. It's simple stuff. All I have to do is drink water. It's probably cheaper than a can of Coke or the can of Pepsi or whatever, right? Okay? So the habit is very important. If you form the habits early, okay, what you'll find here is, in my house, my wife would tell you, you cannot find sugar anywhere. And first, you don't like it, and then your palate changes. And it's no big deal. Now I eat a cake, I say, so sweet, I cannot deal with it anymore. So form the habit and form it early, okay? Exercise, and eat right. And what happened there is you would have the physical stamina to deal with those challenges that will come, and it will come in very unexpected manners. And sometimes you may have to work through the wee hours a day, many days in a row, and if you're not ready to do that, it's hard to lead. Okay, questions? Comments, anybody?
You said leadership is a lonely position, and you said that leadership is also continuous improvement. So what is the role of feedback, and how does a leader get feedback if it plays a role?
Fantastic questions. As a matter of fact, I talk about the specific on the next slide. But let me just talk about here. The way how you get feedback is, on the case of physical checkup, that's one form of feedback, right? You do it this time, and 6 months later, or you do it another time. For me, for example, I'm a high-risk diabetic. So I do my blood test, even though I'm not a diabetic yet, okay? And the reason why I do that is I want to get a feedback, what I ate last night, and what does it mean for me today? And I start avoiding the food that gave me high sugar contents. I still enjoy myself, eat the stuff, right? And I just get rid of it. And if I end up doing those things, I exercise the hell out of it to get rid of it in my systems. So you have to get the feedback, because you don't have the feedback, you will not know what you're doing, right? So another way of feedback is weigh, right? Just weigh yourself in the scale. I mean, you can weigh yourself every day. Check your pulse every day. Check your blood pressure every day. Those are the form of feedback, right? Okay, but the question of feedback is a lot more tougher on the next one, okay? So, but before I go to that, so I just want to share with you, in Synaptics, okay, we actually have a wellness committee. It's made up by employees, okay? And the wellness committee is just what it said. They pay, attention to the well-being of the employees. We have a canteen in the company. We just have a fancy name called Cafe Touche, because we do anything with touch, right? Inside the canteen, why we do not want to enforce lifestyle choices on people, but we actually have nutritional food that we label, and they are being sold at a discount. And try to incentivize people to eat the right food. We have biometric screening that is entirely voluntary. It's free to the employees. They come. We have corporate sponsor exercise on boot camp, on kickboxing, on yoga. As a matter of fact, I go to yoga every Tuesday. Not today because I'm here, okay? And GCC is Global Corporate Challenge, which is actually a company that runs a global, it's very interesting. They run a global competition. So companies form teams and then they walk for so many, or they run for so many, the span of time, and they kind of show you, after so many steps, you start showing different parts of the continent, you learn something about geography. But the whole thing about it is to encourage people to exercise. So companies sponsor events like that. And we have a SLDF, stands for Synaptic Leadership Development Forum, okay? We actually have a homegrown leadership development training exercise that we do with the employees. The first thing we do is do a blood test for all the employee comes in. So we draw blood the night before. They fast, we draw blood the first thing the next day. We actually have a health, fitness and nutrition fitness coach that comes in. This guy used to be, as a matter of fact, he still is, an Olympic cyclist coach. He comes in, look at look at the individual tests, measure your BMI, and then he has a counseling session with you about, certain things, okay? And he has made a big dividends, to the company's focus on this area. So an example of that is, I think all of you guys probably understand how much the healthcare cost has gone up year over year. I can tell you it's double digits every year. Synaptics healthcare insurance go up 1% last year. Because the insurance carriers comes in, they look at all that stuff. Because you guys are low risk. That literally didn't raise our premium at all. So it actually hits the pocketbooks besides just, doing the good things, right? So I would just ask you guys, again, to form good habits, okay? Because once you form a good habits, those things becomes a lot easier to do than, when you start doing it, a lot older. Okay, so the other thing I'll talk about is the mental health, right? Mental fortitude, right? So how do you improve your mental fortitude? First thing is measurements, right? You cannot improve anything unless you can measure it. Now, this one is a lot more tricky, right? If you think that health is difficult, how do you measure them? So I'm going to give you some suggestions in the next foyer how we do that, okay? And it's all about learning about yourself. And those kind of assessment is just like your physical checkup. Do it early. Do it early and then in such a way that you know what to do to improve upon it. And you need to get feedback. Find a coach, find a mentor, find people that you trust, right? Okay? Share with them some of those assessments. Now, in this case, it's actually a lot more trickier because it's not like weight or pulse or blood pressure, but it could be done, okay? And certainly I'm going to share with you some of the ways how it gets done, okay, in the next page there. And you got to learn new skills, just like the diets and just like, the nutritional values. So there are certain things, once you kind of know about yourself, okay, then you know how to deal with it. Okay, for example, I think, I'm sure you guys heard about road rage, right? There are crazy drivers out there, right? Sometimes we don't know what happened, but somebody must push their hot button, right? And they just gone crazy. And you got to learn new skills about what do I call button proof. Make yourself. Know what your hot buttons are and don't let people or incident push you. Now, that to me is a recognition what will get you upset and how do you control that. And you better practice because this one is actually a lot more trickier than health. Why is that? Because most of the time you're dealing with more like an art versus science. A lot of the time, how you deal with that is dealing with people versus some kind of physics or physical phenomena, or electrical phenomena, or mechanical phenomena, or chemical phenomena. Those things are a lot more tricky to deal with. But because it's hard, and you better start early. I mean, I used to think about when I went to this Greek school in Davis, taught me a lot of stuff and so on and so forth. I wish I learned better communication skills. I wish I learned better interpersonal skills. I wish I learned how to deal with conflicts. Because when I go out to the world, that's the problem I face every day. Every day, right? So you better practice and you better do it. And the sooner you do it, the better off you are. Why is that? Because the sooner you do it, the less you have to lose. Let's say you go out, you become a junior engineer. Your responsibility is small. When something messes up, the risk is low. When you become a lot more responsibilities, you got a lot bigger to lose, right? So an analogy I gave you is, for those of you that would do business in Korea, okay, you might never be able to find a meeting with the executive in Samsung, but you can always find time to play a golf game with them because they love to play golf. So if you say, I want a meeting, they may not have time. You say, hey, let's go play golf. They'll go play golf with you. So imagine, right, if the CEO of Samsung wanted to play golf with me, and I don't know how to play golf, right? And I try to learn it on the golf course. After one hole, the guy said, forget it. I don't want to see you again. Because I got a lot more to lose, right? But if I learn how to play golf with friends, I may look silly, but I got nothing to lose, right? So the better I get at this thing, the better I am to prepare myself when the stakes are high, right? So this is the same way. So if you want to start this leadership journey, you got to start early. You got to start when the stakes are low, okay? When you can afford to learn, you can afford to fail. So what are some of those assessments that I want to share with you, okay? I don't know how many of you guys, have you guys heard about MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator? Okay, so this is actually derived by two psychologists, Myers and Briggs. They are couples, okay? And for those of you that don't know, all you have to do is Google it or go to the net, you find it right away. All that said is to learn something about what's your preference, what's your types. Doesn't mean that there's no good or bad in it, right? It's all about learning yourself. So they put, people into 4 different categories, and there are 16 different combinations by the time you finish looking at the permutations, okay? And there's a thing called in the grip. So if I'm in one part of the quadrant because of my natural preference, if I deal with people diametrical opposite to me, it makes me very uncomfortable. So I will share a real story with you that happened to me. So I went to this leadership training classes, and one of the things they did is they put us through an MBTI exercise. So before they show us our results, they separate us into 2 groups, and they gave us an assignment. The assignment was actually a pretty interesting one. He said, look, all of you guys own a pantyhose company, pantyhose, okay? And the company is in trouble, and I want you to find ways to revive the sales. So you have 1 hour and come back and tell us what you're going to do. So there was about 16 of us in that class. There's about 8 of them per group. Most of these are men, okay? As a matter of fact, some of these are generals in the military services. So these people, we don't know that. They call our name. We go to this classroom, right? So in my group, we kind of get it together. We were really organized. There was a timekeeper. There was one that's writing notes. We talk about who's going to present this thing. On the dot, we are done. We walk out. We were really proud of ourselves. So as we were walking out, the other group is still there. So somebody's got to go and kick them out. He said, hey, you guys' time is up, right? So they came out. They were still talking about ideas, about how to revise a pantyhose company. And we were completely blown away by their ideas. I said, wow, those guys are really good. How come we never thought about that? So, there's a little bit of a competitive, spirit going on, right? So we said, this is going to be bad. I mean, we have this dumb idea, bland ideas. They have all those great ideas. So the instructor gets us together and say, well, which group want to present? So we already have people lined up, right? So of course we're ready. The other group look at each other and say, who wrote anything down? Nobody did. Who's going to talk? I don't know. You talk. They were completely disorganized, but yet they have great ideas. Turns out what the instructor did was they grouped all of us that in one type of room in one group. And they completely grouped the other people in another group. So we were very comfortable with each other because we all kind of think alike. And they were very comfortable with each other because they all think alike. But the problem was we didn't get the job done. So the message was, you better understand what your types are, and you better embrace people that you may not be very comfortable with, because that is how you produce the best results, right? So this is just a story to share with you that if you don't know about yourself, right, you don't know about your type, what your natural preference is. Again, like I said, there's no good or bad in it. Another test is called Phiro B. By the way, I'm just giving you a sample of these tests, and I'm by no means, an expert in any of these things, okay? So in this Phiro B, it says identify interpersonal qualities and traits, right? And the dynamics of what you want versus express, okay? And there's conflict dynamic profile. One of the things that you might not realize, we have to deal with conflicts every day. I'm not talking about war. I'm not talking about any of these things, right? I'm talking about schedule conflicts, resources conflicts, okay? I mean, it's almost like the day that that us, right, walk into the real world, okay? And that's what you got to deal with. What's my priority? Which one do I get to do? Which one I'm not going to do, right? Okay? So, and you also have conflict with people. How do you deal with that, okay? And how do you deal with that in terms of how others perceive you? Here's the feedback. How they perceive you when you're under stress, okay? Emotional intelligence. People talk about IQ all the time, and I would tell you that EQ is just as important, if not more important than IQ when you work with people. The good news about EQ is it's something that you can learn, okay? You don't have to, it's not born with it, you can get better at it, but you're gonna know what it is, just like nutrition. You're gonna know how to improve upon it. So, when you look at the mental fortitude part and the physical health part, just remember the following, right? You have to have assessment. You have to have the measurement to know where you are. You have to know what's good and bad. Don't just look at pass, no pass. You have to look at ways to improve those things. You probably have to learn some skills and knowledges, in the case, especially in some of those mental area that I talk about. In the case of physical things, there's a lot of known knowledge there. You got to do it. Okay, you got to get some feedback, get some coaching if it's needed. So this is all about strengthening your mental and physical ability to deal with some of those challenges, deal with some of the learnings you have to go through. So I'm going to jump to a different topic here, and I would say, because Enrique also wanted me to talk about as related to innovation, what that really means. So one of the aspects of leadership has to deal with what I'm going to talk to you about. So on this graph here, I kind of draw performance and time. And every company is expected to improve over time, right? I mean, when you have a quarterly review meetings or quarterly revenue calls, right? It's like, what are you going to do for the next 90 days? Forget about what the last 90 days is going to be like, right? However, some company flattens out, and some company takes off, and some company disappear after a while, right? So have you thought about why? Now, of course, there's a lot of market dynamics, competitions, dislocations, and technologies all the time. But one way that I will share with you the reason why here is, again, this is not meant to be cast in concrete. I just want to share with you some of the observation here is, all companies have good people. So without good people, you couldn't improve. So I call it, there's a lot of individual brilliance in every company. But I would tell you that company that excels practice collective wisdom. This is where 1 + 1 = 3, not 2. So how do you practice collective wisdom to continuously grow your company And I would say that there's got to be a shared value in your company. There's got to be something you say, the sum is bigger than the individuals, and I'm okay to sub-optimize me if I optimize the value of the group, right? So how many of you guys seen the movie The Black Hawk Down? Anybody seen the movie? Remember what strikes you, Oliver, in that movie?
The lack of leadership, right?
Well, first of all, it was a completely botched military operations. Okay, the Army Rangers were sent to Somalia, and it was a complete setup. It was a complete wipeout. Okay, but one thing that I can repeat again and again in the movie is when a soldier was shot, the other guy come pick him up. Because Army Rangers and Marine has a credo, leave no man behind. So if somebody goes down, I'm going to take you home, regardless. You guys agree with that? You guys heard about that? And that is actually a credo. That is very powerful. And that is a form of shared value. I'm going to take you home, whether you're dead or alive. So in that movie, people got shot all the time, and you see people come back, carry this guy, and try to go. And it's very powerful when you have that. So I'll share with you the synaptic, how we develop the core value. Okay? So every company, okay, this is one of the way a company could be characterized is I can either look at a company along the innovation axis or service axis or cost axis. Okay? So if you're a good company, you better excel at least one of them. But chances are you can excel all three. It's just, just positioning, it's just difficult, okay? But even if you excel in any one of them, you better be good enough in the sense that cross the thresholds. So for example, a company that excels in cost is Walmart, right? You go to Walmart, you expect goods are reasonable price. But they better have good enough service for you. Because they're not good enough service for you, is that forget it, I'm not coming here, right? So a company that excels in service, for example, I don't know how many of you guys own a Lexus. I think those guys are pretty darn good when it comes to service. But they are probably reasonably innovative in terms of their cars, even though you're paying a premium for some of the things what they do, right? So the idea behind it is you at least got to be good at one of the axes, but pass the threshold in all three on the other two. Okay? So when we ask ourselves in the early years, is that what kind of company does Synaptic want to be? So I kind of introduce this concept and say, hey, look, we have to be best in class innovations because we are going up against some big companies. And if you cannot out-innovate them, they're going to run you over because their run off in the budget is more than our entire budget in itself. So we have to innovate in a sense that keep on change. We have to keep on obsoleting our own products so that big guys cannot keep up with us. But you got to be second best in service because if all you produce is things, okay, that are unique, you better help your customer design them in. Even though we don't produce anything in cost, we've got to be good enough. So if you look at Synaptics profile, our best in class of those three axes we want to pick is innovation. Indeed, when you look at Synaptic products, you cannot find them in a catalog anywhere because every single one of them is customized. And we obsolete our devices faster than anybody else. Our average life cycle of our products is maybe as few as 3 to 6 months, maybe as 9 to 18 months, and then we move on to the next one. So if that's the company you are, then you have to have a certain share value to encourage that kind of company. So we said we got to be good at creativity and initiative because we believe if you do those two things, innovation will come. And we said we better exemplary customer partnership because we do things, okay, that are challenging to deal with. You have to help customer design it all the time. And then to wrap around that, you have to have a respectful and stimulating work environment to encourage people, encourage them at the heart so that they will work those tough problems, because once you start driving right at the forefront of technology, you're going to a lot of places, okay, that you don't have to answer, right? So that sounds good, but the question is, how does it turn into practice? Okay, you have the share value. How do you turn it into practice? Okay, so we thought about it, and we have operations all over the world. So what we do is we take this share value, and we go into each of the sites, right? And we ask them, what are the words that describe creativity initiative? And I encourage them to speak in their local languages, because words are deceiving. When you say one thing, it means something else to different people, right? So we want them to say, what does it mean, one of the words? So they come up with all kinds of words and stuff like that. Then after they say that, we say, well, what are the behavior that exemplify those words? Because words, right, is a little bit more, higher level. Behaviors now I can see, I can look at, right? Then the third question we ask them is, what are the examples that represent those behaviors in the past? And of course, right, there are a lot of times the company, does the right things and stuff like that. There's a lot of innovative things. So you can actually find out what they are. And then we ask them, what are you willing to do? Remember, leadership starts with I, right? What are you willing to do? If you like the culture of the company, then you have to keep it up. If you keep it up, you better do it. So we do this exercise around the world, into every site. And it's remarkable, regardless of the language, when it comes out, the words are almost the same, and they behave almost the same, right? So I just, take some words out. This is not a exhaustive, list. And the words are like, think out of the box, next generation, fresh, self-starter, cutting edge, proactive. And then some of the behaviors are, well, learn from experience and mistakes. Take risk, do a lot of brainstorming, be open-minded, try and error, observe, take action, no fear, extra step. And then what you do is you make sure the organization, encourage those behaviors, reward those behaviors. And once you start doing that, the innovation will come. You don't need to mandate it. It will come. People, rather than saying, I cannot do this, they'll say, let me find a way to get it done. And chances are they'll find a new way to get it done. So when I talk about this thing, one of the things that people often ask me is, does innovation has got to be always scientific? Does always got to be technical? Well, what do you think? No, right? So I travel a lot. I'm a million miler on United, probably many more than that in other airlines as well, okay? The number one innovative things in airline travel, you know what that is? Number one things. Any guess? In my mind, okay, what do you think it is? Any guess? On time. I wish they are, but they still have a long way to go. Huh? Huh?
Sitting comfort.
Sitting comfort? Not quite. Not quite. Huh?
Your luggage arrived.
Rolling luggage. I have so many garment bags in my home. If anybody you want it, take it. Those are bags you put suits in, you carry, Right? I used to lug those things and my briefcase, When they come back with the rolling luggages, to me it's godsend. It's luggage on wheels. What could be simpler than that? Nowadays, you go through the airport, everybody carries it. To me, that's one of the best innovations in airline travels. Luggage on wheels. Another example of innovation that I really appreciate is when you buy a gift, right? What does the first thing people do? Buy a wrapping paper. You wrap them together, right? And then you put up, right? So rather than do all that stuff, someone come up with an idea. Let me have a gift bag. The bag looks like a wrapping paper, and they charge you $4 or $5 for that thing, and you put your gift in it. Save a lot of time, right? To me, those are some ideas, for example, that you don't have to, to look for the last microns or femtoamps or whatever to figure that stuff out, right? You just look at the needs, what it is, and those are a lot of innovative ideas in here that are out there. All you have to do is think about how to do that, how to create an environment where you get those innovations out. So just kind of closing summary, leadership is about honesty, is about serving, is about setting a good example. And I would ask, especially the students here, to start a journey of paying attention to your health, both physical health and mental health. All those information are out there. Does not require rocket scientists to figure it out. But what it does require is for you to start doing it. And once you start doing it, you will like it. Because what's going to happen is it will get you prepared to deal with those stressful situations, to deal with human dynamics. And you want innovation, leadership has got to set the tone. They have got to reward the right behaviors. And they have got to make sure that you walk the talk and you do the kind of stuff that make people fun, to do those kind of things. Okay, with that, I think my time is up here. Thank you for your attention. And any other questions and comments? Sure, Ron.
Of all the Synaptic products, which do you consider the most innovative? Which you consider the most proud of?
Wow, that's like asking me which one is my kid. Well, I mean that's hard, question. But I would try to kind of answer a little differently, Ron. Okay. When I was running the company, an engineer would come to me and say, Francis, have you thought about doing things this way? And I would think that after a few of those cycles, they ran out of ideas, and they always come up with the next one. So, for example, when I started the company, the touchpad was yay thick, and they would come up with, Francis, I find a way to do an ultra thin touchpad. So they come up with an ultra thin touchpad because touchpad is getting not necessarily thinner, but certainly it's getting thinner from a form factor. But even if you keep the same width, you can put a bigger battery down there, so your life is longer, right? So they come with the ultra thin. The next thing I know is I have a hyper thin that I can do, right? So I said, wow, hyper thin. I don't know the difference between hyper and ultra, but I know hyper is thinner than ultra thin. The next thing I know is they come up with paper thin or plastic thin. I mean, so this innovation cycle never kind of stops, right? And every product that comes out is kind of like, wow, I didn't know I can do that. But if you ask me to kind of pick one, not because of any particular reasons in here, I mean, when I look at the big tsunami of smartphones and clear touch phones, I'm pretty proud of the fact that Synaptics was the first one that come up with the touchscreen phones out there. It turns out my department actually sent in the pictures holding that Prada phone. That was the first touchscreen phone out there. Now, it turns out, Prada, never really took it to the mainstream market, but that was long before any of the phone that came out.
But I got a feeling many of us use your product without realizing we're using your product.
Well, I used to see investors all the time, appear all the time, and I said, you're probably touching our product every day, don't realize it. Because we're in probably 60 to 70% of the notebook computers out there. And we have the touchpad, and you have to touch the touchpad, yeah.
So the development of computers, it's been a long curve as they inevitably become smaller, more powerful, faster. And we look at what's on the horizon, Google glasses, perhaps an iWatch. Maybe someday it will be a subcutaneous device inside our head. It'll be harder to touch these things, to control them. Things like, instead, technologies like voice, or maybe things that follow our eyeballs around are sort of rising to the fore in research for tomorrow's computer. What is the role of touch in the computer of tomorrow? Okay, so I have a very simple answer for that, okay? All the stuff that you talk about mainly are technologies, okay? The thing that I like for you to think about is what problem are we solving, right? So, the example I would kind of say in a joking manner is you cannot have a circus looking for a tent. You got to say, what problem am I solving here? And what is the right technology to solve those problems, right? So for example, voice recognition. I mean, that's nothing new, okay? Why isn't it taken off? I can tell you, it's very little to do with technology. Because when you sit in the car, and lots of time, you want privacy. You don't want to talk in a voice sitting over there, right, with passengers and stuff like that, right? Okay. When you talk about, remote controllers, okay, they don't have to be this big. They can make it probably 10% of the size, and when you open it up, it's just the battery when you think about it.
Because it's got to fit in the hand. If it don't fit in the hand, I mean, I have to find where the buttons are, right? So you have to ask yourself, what problem are you solving? And what is the usage model? So your keyboard, people always say, why is the Q here and A here? It was because a long time ago, they used the mechanical keys coming up, right? Now they have to do that. If they give you a keyboard now that arranged differently, you can never type. So the usage model, once you get used to certain things, it's hard to break the habit. I mean, you may have a Wi-Fi remote controller. I bet you still point at it and click, even though you know it is silly. Because that's how you are. That's what you get used to, right? So I would say that if you have a problem that there needs to be fixed, then you have to say, what is the most intuitive, what is the most logical way to solve that problem, okay? And able to change the usage model or create a new usage model, right? So a new usage model, for example, for touch is you pinch, you roll, you zoom. Those are new usage model. Once you started that, every kid gets up there, right? You will just say, this is how you do this, and this is how you do this, how you do this, right? You create another usage model, it's just very difficult to take off, even though technology-wise it's a lot more sexy. Does it make sense to you, Juan?
It does, but yet it still depends on the existence, the continued existence of a certain form factor, like this size or bigger. As long as that market is still alive, then yes, I can see touch being ever present for I/O. But I can see that. But at the same time, when I think about the future, I think, for example, Google Glasses will be very powerful. What if, for example, you conduct some market research and it suggests that it will go beyond this sort of form factor, it will shrink beyond this. How would you lead a company whose entire history is based on touch and haptics to perhaps focus on another sensory, on another sense?
Okay. So first of all, for Synaptics, I would love that problem. Okay, then I'll answer your question. Okay, because when you look at the runway of existing touch, I got a long way to go. Long way to go. So for example, right, I would love to have touch in every home appliances. Today, they use silver ink technology, do a lot of that stuff, right? Okay, it's just to mention one, right? I would love to have capacitive touch in all the cars. A lot of stuff today use infrared. Okay, they use source, acoustic wave and stuff like that, right? So today, even though it might seem obvious to you, but there's tons of opportunities, okay, for touch, right? But you asked a very good question, which is, how does a company, okay, that has good in one thing, how do you grow out to another company? And the classical example of that is Intel, right? Intel, a long time ago, has said, I don't want to do DRAM anymore, I want to focus on microprocessor, right? And they have done very good in microprocessor. And I know a lot of friends in Intel. And they would tell you that they make so much money on microprocessor, for them to branch out to do something else is very difficult. So that's a problem you bring up, okay? And that becomes what Christensen, called the innovation dilemma, all right? How do you foster innovation in a very successful companies? There are many ways to do that. A lot of time, people will suggest that you have to take it out of the company, create your own small group, which is like what IBM did with the personal computer, right? They didn't have it in the back lab. They put it in Louisiana someplace, right? And do these things, right? For Synaptics, we know that problem exists. We have advanced, research and technology group. We constantly look at those kind of stuff, right? So the kind of stuff, eyeball movements, voice recognition, we are familiar with it, so on and so forth. So you kind of keep an eye on it, but at the same time, you also got to think about what's my return in investments, right? So for us, a lot of our return in investment is still in replacing a lot of the existing touch technologies. I think the smartphone phenomenon has still got a long way to go, right? So I think, but you brought up a very good question. It's really the innovation dilemma. How do you deal with new innovation when you're very successful in existing ones?
Let me suggest that we continue the discussion at the reception next door at Kemper Hall. Please join us. But before we close, I'd like to thank you, Francis.
Okay.
This is a small token
thank
from
you.
our college. And
thank you very much.
Join me and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.